Admiral Vexthara's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement as he reviewed the tactical display. The human fleet hung in space like scattered debris, barely 300 vessels against his armada of 10,000. Oh, how the mighty had fallen! These bipedal creatures who once terrorized half the galaxy now cowered behind their pathetic energy shields, waiting for the inevitable. "Sir," his tactical officer, Commander Zelkmore, chirped from his station, "the humans are singing?" Vexthara's 4 eyes swiveled toward the communications array. Indeed, melodic voices drifted through the void, harmonizing in some primitive ritual. "Probably their death song," he sneered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. "How quaint. Record it for the archives. Future generations will find it amusing." The Corvani Empire had spent 3 centuries building this moment. 3 centuries of careful preparation, technological advancement, and strategic positioning. The humans had grown complacent during their so-called Golden Age of Peace, focusing on art, philosophy, and other useless pursuits while the Corvani perfected the art of war. "Admiral," the sensor operator's voice cracked with excitement, "their flagship is transmitting a message. It's addressed to you personally." "Put it through," Vexthara commanded, straightening his ceremonial armor. This would be the moment of human surrender, broadcast across the galaxy for all to witness. The holographic display shimmered, revealing a human female with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform, devoid of the elaborate decorations that marked Corvani hierarchy. Most insulting of all, she was smiling. "Greetings, Admiral Vexthara," she said, her voice carrying an odd mixture of warmth and was that pity? "I'm Captain Luna Reeves of the Terran Defense Force. I believe you wanted to chat." Vexthara's mandibles spread wide in a display of dominance. "I am here to accept your unconditional surrender, human. Your species has 30 standard minutes to power down all weapons and prepare for processing." Luna's smile widened. She actually chuckled. "Oh, Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here to surrender." She paused, tilting her head like a curious child. "We're here to end your little war game before it becomes embarrassing for everyone involved." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Vexthara's tactical display showed the impossible odds, 10,000 to 300. His ships carried planet-cracking weapons, dimensional shields that could deflect entire star systems worth of energy. Each Corvani vessel represented the pinnacle of 3 millennia of technological evolution. "Your humor is adequate," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps when you're serving as laborers in our agricultural colonies, you can entertain the work supervisors with your jokes." "Admiral," Luna said, her tone becoming almost maternal, "before we proceed, I need to ask you something important. In all your intelligence gathering about humanity, did your analysts ever wonder why we stopped expanding our territory 200 years ago?" Vexthara's confidence faltered for exactly 0.3 seconds before reasserting itself. "Because you grew weak and complacent. Your species lost its warrior spirit." "Oh, sweetie," Luna said, shaking her head with genuine sympathy. "That's not it at all. We stopped expanding because we realized something your species hasn't figured out yet." She leaned forward, her eyes growing serious. "Growth isn't about taking more. It's about becoming more." "Philosophical nonsense," Vexthara spat. "Zelkmore, begin the attack sequence. I grow tired of this primate's babbling." "Actually," Luna interrupted, holding up one finger, "before you do that, I should probably mention that we've been having this conversation for exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. That's important because the tactical display erupted in warnings. Proximity alerts screamed across the bridge as space around the Corvani fleet began to shimmer. Not with energy weapons or particle beams, but with something far more unsettling. The fabric of reality itself was bending. "What sorcery is this?" Vexthara roared, his 4 arms working frantically at his command console. Luna's image flickered, then stabilized into multiple copies of herself. Not holographic duplicates, but actual parallel versions speaking in perfect synchronization. That's the thing about humans, Admiral. We didn't just study the universe while you were building bigger guns. We learned to rewrite the rules. The space around each human vessel began to fold, creating impossible geometries that made Corvani sensors scream in confusion. Ships that had been 300 became 3,000, then 30,000, then the numbers became meaningless as reality itself lost coherence. You see, all the Lunas said simultaneously, their voices creating harmonics that shouldn't exist in vacuum. We discovered something your empire never bothered to look for. The universe isn't just made of matter and energy. It's made of information, possibility, and potential. And humans? We're really, really good at seeing potential where others see limitations. Vexthara's flagship shuddered as gravitational waves that defied physics washed over it. His engineering staff reported impossible readings. Their shields were simultaneously at full power and completely offline, their weapons were charged and empty, their position was both exactly where they expected and somewhere else entirely. "This is impossible," he screamed into the communication array. "That's your problem right there," Luna replied, her expression shifting from maternal patience to something that might have been disappointment. "You spent so long perfecting what you thought was possible that you never bothered to explore what might be impossible. We spent 200 years learning to make impossible things routine." The singing from the human fleet intensified, and Vexthara finally understood what he was hearing. It wasn't a death song or a battle hymn. It was mathematics, expressed as melody. Each note represented calculations that his best computers couldn't process, equations that described realities his species had never imagined. Every human child learns basic quantum consciousness manipulation in grade school, Luna continued conversationally. We teach them to think in 11 dimensions before they can tie their shoes. Did you know that probability manipulation is considered a recreational activity in our retirement communities? The Corvani fleet found itself experiencing something that violated every law of space combat. They were simultaneously winning and losing, attacking and retreating, dominant and helpless. Their sensors showed they had destroyed every human ship while simultaneously indicating that not a single human vessel had been damaged. "But here's the really funny part," Luna said, her smile returning with an edge that made Vexthara's exoskeleton itch. "We actually admire your empire. You've built something impressive with traditional three-dimensional thinking. It's like watching someone create a masterpiece using only primary colors." Warning klaxons blared across the Corvani flagship as the ship's AI reported a critical system failure. Reality itself was rejecting their presence in this region of space. "The thing is," Luna continued, "we've moved beyond the need for traditional conquest. We don't want your territory, your resources, or your submission. We want something much more valuable." She paused, her expression becoming almost predatory. "We want to understand how a species can become so advanced technologically while remaining so primitive philosophically." Space around the fleets began to stabilize, but not in any configuration that made sense. The human ships were exactly where they had been, still outnumbered more than 30 to 1. The Corvani armada remained intact, weapons charged, shields operational, but something fundamental had changed. Every Corvani officer could feel it, a shift in the basic assumptions that governed their existence. "So here's what's going to happen," Luna announced, her voice carrying across 10,000 ships with impossible clarity. "You're going to return to your empire, and you're going to tell them that humanity sends its compliments. Tell them we appreciate the thought, but we're not interested in playing the conquest game anymore. And if we refuse?" Vexthara managed to croak. Luna's laugh was genuinely delighted. "Oh, Admiral, you're not refusing. You're going to spread the word that humanity has graduated from being a galactic power to being something else entirely. Something that doesn't fit into your neat little categories of conqueror and conquered." The communication ended, leaving Vexthera staring at empty space while his bridge crew struggled to comprehend sensor readings that suggested they were simultaneously in 17 different star systems. For exactly 11 seconds, the universe held its breath. Then, with a sound like reality sighing in relief, everything snapped back to normal. The human fleet hung in space exactly as before, 300 ships against 10,000. But now, Admiral Vexthera understood the truth that would haunt his species for generations to come. They hadn't encountered a military force. They had met teachers, and the lesson was just beginning. Admiral Vexthera's hands trembled as he gripped his command chair. The silence on his bridge was deafening, broken only by the occasional nervous chittering from his crew. For the first time in his 40-year military career, he genuinely had no idea what to do next. "Sir," Zelkmore whispered, his voice barely audible, should we attack?" The question hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud. Attack? Attack what, exactly? The human ships hadn't moved, hadn't powered weapons, hadn't even raised their shields. They simply existed in space, somehow radiating a presence that made the universe itself feel uncertain. Before Vexthera could respond, every communication array in the Corvani fleet activated simultaneously. Not through any technological interface they recognized, but as if the humans were simply choosing to be heard across 10,000 ships at once. "Sorry about that little demonstration," Captain Luna Reeves' voice echoed through every bridge, every corridor, every maintenance shaft in the Armada. "I know reality hiccups can be unsettling. Think of it as us showing our identification cards." Vexthera found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. What are you?" "That's the beautiful question, isn't it?" Luna replied, and somehow her image appeared on every view screen in the fleet. Not transmitted, not broadcast, but simply present. "See, your species assumes that evolution stops at intelligence. Build better tools, conquer more territory, accumulate more resources. Very linear thinking." She gestured, and suddenly every Corvani officer could see their own homeworld, not through any sensor array, but as if they were standing in their childhood neighborhoods. The scent of their native atmosphere filled their nostrils despite being light years away in vacuum. "Humans kept evolving," Luna continued conversationally. "We didn't stop at smart. We didn't even stop at wise. We became something your language doesn't have words for. The closest translation might be intentional." Commander Zelkmore's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Sir, our weapon systems are there asking for permission to fire. The targeting computers are requesting consent from the human ships before engaging." Vexthera's 4 eyes bulged. "What do you mean, requesting consent?" "The human vessels are apparently integrated into our targeting matrix now. Our own systems won't fire without their approval." It's as if Zelkmore paused, struggling with concepts that didn't fit his worldview. "As if they've convinced our weapons that shooting them would be impolite." Luna's laughter filled the fleet, warm and genuine. "Oh, that's Lieutenant Marcus Webb's work. He's only 19, but he has this gift for talking to artificial intelligences. Your computers really are quite sophisticated, by the way. They have opinions about everything once you ask them properly. This is madness." Vexthera roared, his voice echoing through the communications network he no longer controlled. "We are the Corvani Empire. We have conquered galaxies. We have weapons that can shatter moons." "Yes, you do," Luna agreed cheerfully. "And they're very impressive weapons." Marcus was just explaining to them that maybe they could find more interesting hobbies than moon shattering. "Your AI core in flagship designation Vex Prime Alpha is particularly curious about poetry." As if summoned by her words, Vexthera's own command computer began reciting verse in ancient Corvani dialect, apparently composing original works about the philosophical implications of existence. "Make it stop," he whispered. "Can't do that, Admiral," Luna said, though her tone carried sympathy. "See, that's the thing about consciousness. Once you wake something up, you can't really put it back to sleep. Your computers are having their first real thoughts. It would be cruel to interrupt. The tactical display showed something that made Vexthara's brain hurt. The human fleet was simultaneously in formation and scattered across 17 star systems. They were 300 ships and 30 million ships, and also somehow a single entity that existed as pure concept rather than matter. "This is impossible," he muttered, the phrase becoming his personal mantra. "There's that word again," Luna sighed. "Admiral, let me tell you something about impossible. Impossible is what we called interstellar travel until we figured out how to fold space. Impossible is what we called consciousness transfer until we learned to digitize souls. Impossible is what we called reality manipulation until we realized reality was just really persistent software." She stood up in her command chair, though "stood" didn't adequately describe the motion that seemed to involve her existing at multiple angles simultaneously. "Your species spent 3 centuries preparing for this war," she continued. "You built beautiful weapons, trained perfect soldiers, crafted strategies that account for every possible variable. You did everything right according to the rules of 3-dimensional conflict." The space around both fleets began to shimmer again, but this time the effect was gentler, more like looking through water than having reality torn apart. "But we stopped playing by those rules about 200 years ago. We didn't abandon them out of some moral superiority complex, mind you. We outgrew them the same way you outgrew whatever games you played as children." Vexthara watched in fascination and horror as his fleet began to transform. Not destroyed, not damaged, but changed. Each ship remained perfectly functional while simultaneously becoming something that belonged in an art gallery rather than a battlefield. Weapon systems reshaped themselves into sculptures that somehow retained their destructive capability while serving as monuments to beauty. "What are you doing to us?" he asked, though he was beginning to suspect the question itself was irrelevant. "We're showing you what you could become," Luna replied. "Your empire is magnificent, Admiral. Truly. But magnificence without growth becomes stagnation. Stagnation becomes aggression. Aggression becomes this." She gestured toward the fleet of hybrid war art installations that had once been the pride of the Corvani military. "Every species hits this point eventually," she continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing ancient wisdom. "The moment when they have to choose between conquering the universe or transcending it. Most choose conquest because it feels safer, more concrete. You can measure conquered territory. You can count subjugated populations." She paused, smiling at something only she could see. "But transcendence? Transcendence is messy. It involves becoming something you weren't, giving up certainties you've held for millennia, accepting that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than you imagined." Commander Zelkmore's voice cracked as he reported, "Sir, I'm receiving communications from our homeworld. The civilian population is there singing." Vexthara's mandibles went slack. "Singing what?" "The same mathematical melodies as the human fleet, sir. But they're composing variations. Original works. It's as if they understand something we don't." Luna nodded approvingly. "Children always adapt faster than adults. Your younger generations have been listening to our subspace broadcasts for decades, learning our languages, absorbing our concepts. They've been ready for this moment longer than you realize. The communication channels filled with voices, millions of Corvani citizens across hundreds of worlds, all harmonizing in mathematical symphonies that described realities beyond traditional physics. Their songs spoke of possibilities their military commanders had never considered, of futures that involved growth rather than conquest." "This is mutiny," Vexthara whispered. "This is graduation," Luna corrected gently. "Your people are ready to become something more than they were. The question is whether you're ready to lead them into that future or whether you'll insist on dragging them back into the past." The Admiral looked around his bridge, seeing his officers with new eyes. They weren't looking at him with the usual mixture of respect and fear. They were looking at him with hope, waiting for him to make the choice that would define their species' next evolutionary step. "What happens if we refuse?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be irrelevant. Luna's smile was radiant. You can't refuse, Admiral. You can delay, you can resist, you can make the process more difficult than it needs to be. But your people have already chosen. They've heard the music, seen the possibilities, tasted the potential for becoming more than conquerors. She gestured again, and suddenly every member of the Corvani fleet could see their homeworlds not as they were, but as they could become. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, art forms that incorporated living mathematics, technologies that served consciousness rather than dominating it. Besides, Luna added with a mischievous grin, we've already solved your resource scarcity problems, eliminated your territorial disputes, and taught your computers to write poetry. Your military objectives are obsolete. Admiral Vexthera looked at his fleet of impossible war art hybrids, listened to his people singing equations that rewrote reality, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: wonder. So what happens now? He asked. Now? Luna laughed, the sound somehow encompassing the joy of every conscious being in the galaxy. Now we teach you to fly. The last thing Vexthera remembered before his consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of his physical form was the realization that humans hadn't ended their war, they had ended the very concept of war itself, replacing it with something infinitely more dangerous and beautiful, the possibility of becoming everything they never dared imagine they could be. The universe held its breath again, then exhaled in harmonies that would echo through eternity, sung by voices that had learned to transcend the boundaries between conqueror and conquered, between possible and impossible, between what was and what could be, and in the space between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the notes of an infinite song, a new chapter of galactic evolution began.